and then we will go from there. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special live National Ag Week Farmer Time special. My name's Jane, and I'm speaking to you from Wathaurong country today. So I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Now, before I hand over to Ash, our amazing producer, I'm just going to follow up with a few little housekeeping things. So the first one is that as we are recording this session, please have yourself on mute and have your camera off. We are going to have an opportunity for the students to ask some questions at the end of the session. And so when we do that, we'll just ask you to pop your questions in the chat for us. We are going to send out some awesome Produce It, Protect It packs to schools at the end of this session. So we would love if you could pop the name of your school and the number of students who are participating in this session in the chat at some stage, just so that we've got an idea about who to send bits and pieces to. And it will also just give us a bit of an indication of how long we can take for our question and answer time. So if you teachers can pop school name and student numbers in the chat, that would be phenomenal. All righty, I'm going to pass over to Ash now, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Jane. Good morning, everybody. So as Jane mentioned, my name is Ash Brooks. I'm a farmer in Dimboola in Western Victoria. I also work in agriculture off the farm as well. So I work for a wheat and barley breeding company. So agriculture is very much our life. Here over in Dimboola, my husband's family have been in the region for 150 years. My family are also farmers. So farming is very much what we do and a part of life, and has been for many generations. So we're very much grain growers here. We don't have any livestock. The only livestock we do have is our beautiful puppy dog, Frank. So he's a sausage dog. He certainly keeps us very entertained. I do have him here, but it's a little bit cold in the country today, so he's taking cover. So we grow, here in Dimboola, we grow wheat. And I've got a couple of plants which I picked out from the paddock this morning, which I thought I would show you. So we grow wheat. We also grow barley. So quite another cereal crop, a little bit different to wheat. We grow some canola. We're getting close to harvest, so that's why all of the crops are looking quite golden at the minute. And we also grow lentils. So the lentils, they're the last to harvest, so they're looking a little bit greener at the minute. So all of our crops, I suppose, are largely destined for international markets, and they're for people to eat. Obviously, they're used in a lot of their food products, but they also are used to feed animals and things like that. So depending on the crop, it really depends on which market that they will go into. In terms of the production here on our farm, we produce thousands of tonnes of grain every year. So the amount of the beer, the bread, the canola oil, and the vegetable dal that can produce, to be honest, I couldn't quantify. But in terms of boats, if you have a look at, if you've seen some of the big ships down in Geelong or in Port of Melbourne, the average ship is probably about 40,000 tonnes. So our farm would probably fill about 1/3 of one of those big ships. So just to put it into context, I suppose, in terms of how much grain we produce. On our farm, we're really lucky that it takes an army to produce, obviously, all of the grain that we do. So we've got the support of some really great people that work on our farm. And across the year, we probably have, in addition to our family members, another 3 or 5 people that help us. So really appreciative of everything that they do as well. But today I thought I'd have a little chat to you guys about some of the areas of our farming system that are really important. And one of those is the beneficial insects, and particularly thought I'd chat about why these are so important to our farm. First of all, I just thought I'd start. I've picked a couple of insects and probably animals too that I find particularly interesting and that we monitor quite closely on the farm. First one I thought I'd show you or talk about is bees. Now, I know that you're all very familiar with bees, but you might be less familiar in terms of the value that they provide to our flower and canola crops. So in spring, our paddocks, if you've driven out into the country in spring, you see those nice yellow fields of gold. They always look great, but they're very pungent and they've got a really strong scent. And because of that, the bees are really drawn to them. They produce a lot of pollen, which is useful for bees, for wild bees producing honey. So quite interesting on that front. But these are particularly important to us is because the more bees that can pollinate our canola, the more seeds that we'll be able to produce and the better quality those seeds will be. So anything we can do to make sure that there's lots of bees is always a good thing for us. In terms of other insects, the other one I thought I would talk about today is the snout mite. So this guy's a really interesting little one. I'm not sure if you can see. So he's a little bright orange beast. He's about 2 to 3 millimeters long in length, and his babies or her babies are certainly a little bit smaller. And as you can see, they've got a really distinct snout, so it's super pointy. And they're very fast moving. They only live for a couple of months. But what they tend to do is they eat other insects, which are not so great for our crops. So insects like red-legged earth mite, lucerne flea, they tend to suck away at the green leaves on the crop. And what it does, I suppose, the crop then has to consume much more energy to be able to grow. So if we can encourage little guys like this to persist in our system, it really helps in terms of making sure that our crops survive and grow as efficient as they possibly can. Another one I thought I would mention is called a aphid parasitic wasp. Now this one's a little bit different to the snout mite because he only or she only targets one insect. So because it's a parasitic wasp, what it means is that it targets aphids, and this wasp finds an aphid and says, okay, I am going to insert my larvae or my babies inside you, and then with those babies inside, they tend to grow and they feed off the aphid. And unfortunately, it means the aphid is no longer with us and it passes away. But what it means is, I suppose, that the parasitic wasps get the insects, which aren't so great for the farming system, under control. And it just ensures that the ecosystem is kept in balance, which is always what we want to see. And then the other one, which I thought I would talk about today, is the good old lady beetle. I remember as a kid, I always enjoyed the lady beetles, and I'm sure that you've seen plenty of those out and about in your back gardens or at parks or wherever it might be. But the lady beetle is one that we observe quite a lot. There's about 3 species of these guys. As you know, they're orange or yellow, depending on the species. They've got really dark dots on them, and they normally live for about 3 or 4 months. And we find these really helpful in the farming systems because they too also keep some of the not so great pests under control for us. And I always find that when you're walking around in the crops through winter and spring, when you see lots of ladybugs, it's a really good sign that you've got a healthy crop. And we certainly do see a lot of these within our systems, which is good. So I suppose what we aim to do with our insects and the way that we control our insects on the farm is that we ensure that our farming practices really enhance and make sure they support all of the good work that we've done in previous seasons. So a lot of that is around, and one of the good examples of that is probably at harvest time. At seeding time. It's when we sow the seeds. So when we come through with our big equipment, we aim to come through and delicately sow the seed, making minimal disturbance in the soil as we possibly can. So the metal comes through, drops the seed down, drops into the soil, closes over, and then as it rains, the crops start to grow. So our aim is to try and not disturb the soil so that all the good bacteria, the fungi, all of those things, their homes and their environments aren't disturbed. If we disturb their environment, it means we're going backwards. And some of those organisms have kind of got to start from the start. So a little bit on soils. I'm not sure how much you guys have done on soil in science at school and different things, but it's certainly an area that I find really interesting. So soils, believe it or not, are actually full of life. They allow good structure for plants to grow, and they provide plants nutrients. Just like you need food, plants need food, and that's what the soil does. So if we have a look at this little picture I found, and I thought it was really interesting. In 1 teaspoon of soil, there is over 100,000 different species. So on 1 teaspoon of soil, 1 gram, there's 100,000 species, or 10 million different individuals. So you think about that. If you get a teaspoon out of your kitchen drawer, scoop up a teaspoon of soil, you've got an awful lot of little living organisms in that, which is pretty cool. So I suppose in our farming systems, we want to make sure that all of those organisms are looked after. And so we do that in a number of different ways. What's also really important to us is, and because we want to look after all of those organisms, what that does is it helps us maintain what we call really good soil structure. So I've got another picture. In our farming systems, it's really important that we have good soil structure. So if we've got good soil structure, it allows for the water to push through the soil. The soil can wet up really nicely and nice and evenly, and it allows the plant roots to extract that moisture and push through the profile and be nice and happy as they grow. If we've got a not so great soil structure, which you can see here, it's really tough and it's hard work for the plants. It means they've got to use more energy to push through the soil to try and achieve the same thing. So as farmers, if we've got tougher soil, the plants are not going to grow as effectively as if the soil is nicely well structured. So as you can see, there's certainly value for us to try and maintain our really good soil structure. So the ways that we test our soil structure, we take samples just like a lot of different other industries. We send those away to a laboratory and they send us back a lot of different results. And some of the things that we test is what we call organic carbon. So that's a measure of how much matter is in the soil. We test for nutrients because we need to know how much we need to feed the crops, because like you, they get hungry, I get hungry. So we're always trying to understand what we've got to feed our crops. And we also test how well structured the crop is. I mean, how well structured the soil profile is. So there's measures and means to certainly do that. So that's always a good thing for us to do and something we do probably every year. But I have to say, one of my favourite animals in the soil is probably the earthworm. Even though it's not an insect, it's an animal. I always love looking at the earthworms in our paddocks. It's because it's really interesting to see. Sometimes you'll see where we have driven our equipment along to sow our crop or to harvest our crop. Within a couple of months, when you've got good moisture conditions, you'll see where the earthworm has come through, they've eaten the soil, and basically there is not a lot of, you can't see any more where those tire marks have been. The earthworms have come through, eaten it, and all you can see is their little castings. And every time I see that, for me, that's a really good sign that our soils are living, they're healthy, and they're happy, and it shows that we're looking after our ecosystems in the best way that we possibly can. So that's just a little bit on soils, but what I thought I would do as well is just show you a couple of our crop plants that we do grow, if you guys are interested. I hope you can see these. Because as well as being a farmer, I also work for a wheat and barley breeding company. I have to say I'm going to choose my favourite crop, and that's probably barley. For all the mums and dads out there, they might like barley too, because there's some pretty good end uses for barley. So barley, with our barley, we generally sow our barley in May. So it starts to get a little bit cold, it rains, and that's when we typically sow it. We look after that crop all year as it grows. It's nice and lush and green. And it starts off, it's a little plant, sort of grows quite short, quite spiky, pushes out what we call tillers, which are basically branches, like branches on trees. Those branches, once it says, I think we've got enough branches, it then says it's time to grow up. And that's the stage that we call stem elongation. So as you can see, barley has quite a long stem. So it takes a good couple of months for that stem to become what we call fully elongated. And once the stem reaches a growth stage where it says, okay, we've reached where we need to be in terms of our stem height, it pushes out what we call the heads. And the heads is the fruit-bearing heads. So they're the ones, as you can see here, that contain all of the grains, which is what, as farmers, we're trying to produce. So the more grain that we can produce, the better it is for us. So this season, our crops, we've had reasonable rainfall. Our barley has grown quite well, and we're really happy. We're probably, I would say, about 2 weeks away from harvesting our barley crops. So that's where our big equipment will come in, harvest the barley, and then we will deliver that to potentially the port, and that may go internationally from that point. But yeah, barley is a really great crop because it's got so many different uses. I'm sure you might have found sometimes barley can be in your soup. Sometimes barley can be in different types of beverages, beer. It can also be used to feed animals. So it's a really good crop. So I suppose that's just a little bit about my favourite crop. But in terms of, just to finish off, in terms of what I think about being the best part of being a farmer is, I think I really enjoy cooking. So I love producing food. It makes me feel really special to know that we're making a lot of people happy across the globe by producing food and, allowing them to eat and things like that. I also really enjoy, we have kids just like you. So we have a son and a daughter who they are 4 and 6, and they love being part of a food producing system too. We often get our chickpeas in the past and we try and make hummus. Sometimes we put too much lemon in and sometimes it doesn't always work, but we have good fun in terms of actually cooking with the produce that we make here on our farm. And I think my husband and I, we enjoy the challenge of farming because some years it rains lots, some years it doesn't rain a lot. So the challenge for us is to try and grow the best possible crop we can, depending on the season and all the temperatures that every individual year presents. So that's just a quick summary of what we do on our farm. And if you had any questions, we'd certainly be happy to help or answer those.
Thank you so much for that, Ash. That was phenomenal. I learned lots as well. If anybody does have any questions for Farmer Ash, they can pop them in the chat now, and then we'll have some questions and answer time. Any questions that we might not get to during this session, we'll try and get some answers to you via email at a later date. So if you've got any questions now, or if any students have got any questions, we'd love to have them popped in the chat.
I'll find the puppy and I can show you the puppy.
Oh, how many different types of crops do you grow? Is our first question.
Yeah, so this year we have 5 types of crops, but every year is different because it really depends on our system and the season. Sometimes if we come into our sowing period and we've had lots of rain, there's opportunities to grow different crops that might grow more rain. But this year we have 5 types of crop.
Awesome, thank you. Do you grow more barley because that's your favorite?
Maybe would be my first answer. It's funny when at the start of the year, as a family, we sit down and we work out what crops we're going to grow in which parts of our land and which paddocks. And my husband and my brother-in-law often say, no more barley, Ash, no more barley. So yes, sometimes because I do like barley, but I think the key thing for us is in any system, you've got to keep it in balance. So making sure that we grow a certain amount of barley, a certain amount of canola, a certain amount of lentils, because we've also got to be thinking about what we want to grow next year, because you can't generally grow barley on barley on barley. You have to rotate the land and how the crops are grown each year. So not only when you're planting your crops are you thinking about what you're growing this year, but you're also thinking about what you'd like to grow in the future.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that, Ash. The next question that we've got is, how far down do the roots of the barley grow?
Very good question. Really depends if you can remember the soil type picture that I showed you. If you've got really good soils, they can go down beyond 1 metre. So sometimes, and it depends on the thickness, you'll find root hairs well below 1 metre. If the soil is really tough and really tight, that stops the roots from going down. So they'll be much closer to the top of the soil. But good soils, in excess of 1 metre below the surface.
Whoa, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
That's on a, all good, well-structured soil, everything going your way. Yeah, that's possible. But like most things, there's no exact rule because it's science. Things change. And really, it depends on the different soil types.
For sure. Awesome. All right. I think we've got one more, unless anybody else has got any more questions. So of those crops, which is the most popular crop?
I would say, so nationally, if we think about not just our farm, but nationally, wheat. Australia is known for its wheat production. So wheat is by far and away the largest winter crop. And then I would say probably followed by barley, canola, and our lentils are lentils are probably a niche crop because we're probably some of the few farming areas in Australia that do grow lentils because our soils support lentils, whereas a lot of other soil types across the country don't. So yeah, wheat is definitely the biggest crop.
Awesome. All right. Well, if that's all the questions that we've got for now, I would just like to say a huge thank you to Ash for joining us today. This has been so informative and so exciting. So I really appreciate your time. To all of the schools who were able to tune in today, thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you again for some more of our National Ag Week live Farmer Time sessions. And if not, we hope you celebrate National Ag Week with different resources from the Producer Protectorate website within your classroom. Thanks so much for your time, everyone. Have a fantastic National Ag Week.
Thank you, everybody. Happy Ag Week.